All right, so Jon Stewart, who, at least in my opinion, is one of the greatest comedians and late night talk show hosts in the modern political era, went on The New Yorker, where he was on a podcast with a guy named David Remnick, where he gave his views on cancel culture. And I think this is really refreshing to hear from a comedian. And honestly, I'm glad that he came out and said this, especially as we are dealing with all of the drama surrounding Dave Chappelle and his recent special, specifically the trans jokes that he made within that special. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my takes on the Dave Chappelle situation. But first, I just want to play you this take from Jon Stewart here, because I think this is what it actually looks like when a comedian has some balls and is willing to stand up to criticism and understands the actual nature of modern day cancel culture, or at least doesn't pretend to play the victim basically in response to mild criticism as we have seen from other comedians. So here's a refreshing take on cancel culture from one of the best comedians in modern history.
A lot of voices now, John, are like Bill Maher, for example. When it comes to the culture wars, he expresses his frustration over and over again. I can't say this. We're limited in saying that. We have to wear a gag, and this kind of expression. Comedians are talking all the time about, well, I feel I can't do this. I can't say that.
No, listen,
how do you come down on this?
Who talk about cancel culture. Here's a nice absurdity.
Okay.
People that talk about cancel culture never seem to shut the fuck up about it. Like, there's more speech now than ever before. It's not you can't say, it's that when you say it, look, the internet has democratized criticism. What do we do for a living? We talk shit. We criticize, we postulate, we opine, we make jokes, and now other people are having their say. And that's not cancel culture. That's relentlessness. We live in relentless culture. And the system of the internet and all those other things are incentivized to find the pressure points of that and exacerbate it.
You were a nightly presence.
Right, so he goes on to ask him other unrelated questions, but I think that take from Jon Stewart is 100% correct in identifying exactly what cancel culture is in the modern conversation that we have been having, right? Especially from conservatives. You see it relentlessly. If they are even given the mildest pushback or the mildest criticism, the same people who go out and pretend to care about freedom of speech and they pretend to care about liberation of ideas and the marketplace of ideas and having all of these challenging conversations, right? That's all you ever hear from them. And then the second that they are criticized, they turn around and they're saying, I'm being canceled. Here's my Patreon link. Go subscribe in the link below. So that's the real dynamic of what is actually happening, especially when you're talking about extremely powerful comedians and other public figures who, when they apparently get canceled, as Dave Chappelle was claiming that he was canceled over his recent special, they are currently making, millions and millions of dollars over the content that they are producing. Millions and millions of people are watching the content that they are producing. So you're not canceled, okay? You are not being pushed out of polite society, all right? You're just getting some criticism. And why are you getting that criticism? Well, exactly for the reason that Jon Stewart just pointed out there, because the internet has essentially liberated or given people at least the platform to try to give their opinions out there. And so, yes, you are going to have criticism. You're never going to be able to appease all factions of the country, right? You're always going to have somebody who's mad at you in response to the things that you were saying, especially if you are a comedian who is supposed to be pushing the boundaries. That's your job as a comedian. And I have absolutely no problem with people pushing the boundaries as long as it's funny, as long as it's entertaining, and as long as you're not, punching down necessarily. And so I think everything that he just said in that moment is exactly what it takes, or what it looks like, from a comedian who actually has the balls to stand up to that criticism that comedians are inevitably going to get, especially in the day and age of the internet, right? So that's an inevitability. You, as a comedian especially, should have thick enough skin to be able to stand up to some of that scrutiny and not play the victim and say, oh, I'm being canceled, Dave Chappelle. Like, I'm calling out specifically Dave Chappelle, right? Oh, I'm being canceled. He literally said this, right? So I got a quote here, right? He said, Dave Chappelle gets standing ovation amid Netflix special controversy. If this is what being canceled is, I love it. I mean, listen, dude, if you were actually being canceled, you wouldn't have the tens of millions of fans who are watching your content, defending it, and coming out and basically being your little butt buddies and defending you in every step of this process, okay? You are not being canceled. You never were being canceled. You just had some people who called you out for some bad transphobic jokes, okay? That's the reality of the situation. If you want to look at actual cancel culture, well, we had this immediately following the Dave Chappelle special, and I have no actual confirmation that this story is specific to the tweets that were sent, but Netflix suspends transgender employee who tweeted about the Dave Chappelle special, basically giving an honest critique of him. And again, we don't know if the tweets were actually the reason she got fired, but the point stands that comedians like Dave Chappelle and Bill Maher, they are not the ones who are actually being canceled. The people who are actually being canceled in our modern society are people like Palestinian rights advocates who get kicked out of schools or who get removed from their job positions. Those are the people who are actually being canceled. The people who are being canceled are people like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, who are whistleblowers who have been completely prosecuted and canceled, if you want to call it that, by the American government and by the American media. These are the types of people who are actually pushed out of polite society, okay? That's what cancel culture actually is. Cancel culture is not when Dave Chappelle goes and makes tens of millions of dollars off of his Netflix special and then gets the mildest degree of criticism for some of the jokes that he made and then pretends like he's being canceled. You're not being canceled, Dave, okay? You just received a little bit of criticism for jokes. By the way, and I watched his entire special, right? And this is just my opinion, okay? I'm a fan of Dave Chappelle. I've liked many of his specials in the past. He's made me laugh on countless occasions, right? But the jokes that were made at the expense of trans people in his special, overwhelmingly, I just simply don't think that they were really funny, okay? Maybe that makes me a little loser over here, but I really just don't think that the jokes were that funny. And I think if you're going to make edgy jokes, specifically jokes about communities, specifically like the trans community or the LGBT community who have historically been prosecuted in this country and who are, constantly getting punched down upon, if you're going to make jokes about those communities, at least make them good and at least make them jokes where those communities are a part of the joke instead of just being the butt of the joke. And your point is really nothing other than to be a whiny old complainy boomer. That's what I thought Dave Chappelle sounded like. That's what I thought I've seen Bill Maher sounding like, especially recently. These people do not even sound like necessarily comedians anymore. If you're just going to go out there and complain for an hour about how everything is cancel culture and all of these other marginalized communities are like coming after you and that you're the victim in this entire situation, it just makes you look pathetic, okay? And so that's my take on it. I'm not going to back down from that. I'll probably get some criticism here for going after Dave Chappelle a little bit, but honestly, I just didn't think the jokes were that funny, okay? Again, there's nothing wrong with being edgy. There's nothing wrong with pushing the boundaries, but if you're going to do it in the right way and do it in a way that's funny and entertaining, and obviously that's entirely subjective, so I'll leave it up to you guys what you thought on it. But I think, again, the point that Jon Stewart was making at the beginning of this is the point that should be standing, okay? There is no cancel culture for some of the most powerful and influential comedians and politicians and other groups in the country. You're not the ones who are facing cancel culture. The actual cancel culture exists on the marginalizations of society, okay? And so that's the actual underlying reality, and that's why I wasn't a big fan of the Dave Chappelle special, even though there were some good jokes in it. And that's why I am a fan of Jon Stewart, and he actually has a new show that is coming out, and so I'm actually excited to see what he's going to have to say, and hopefully he can bring some more level-headed takes to the comedic political sphere.